Hey everyone, welcome to Reflection Moments. My name is Gavin, and joining me as always is Bre
What's up?
and JP.
Yo.
And we want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode as we dive into all things grace, the gospel, and culture.
Yes.
How you guys been doing this week? You guys doing all right?
You know, it's been a week.
It's a good week.
I feel like it's interesting whenever you come off of a holiday weekend. The weeks are short, but they can feel really long.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
yeah, short, but in spots felt long.
Yeah.
But glad to be here
That's right.
to talk about some goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks to all of you who are listening or watching, hanging out with us today. I'm really excited about today's topic. This is a reflection moment from a couple of months ago, but I think it's kind of like a weekly or daily topic that I think is either on the forefront of people's mind or even playing in the background of their life. They don't really maybe even acknowledge to some extent, which is the topic of pain.
Yeah.
And that's such a broad word. It's such a, I would even say ignored word to an extent, right? Because we all live with pain in some degree. So therefore you live day to day ignoring it to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's present. We don't always talk about it with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be real. Like, you may be in a home where you have a partner or spouse and you may not always talk about it with them. Right? So like, pain has an interesting way of being at times very private.
Yeah.
But then the projection of it can oftentimes be really public. Right? So even though we may be digesting pain privately, we oftentimes will project the expression of that in public ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes on the people who love us the most, right?
Yeah.
People who are around you every day, or, you know, whom you share a home with or what have you. But yeah, pain is a really interesting one. And this week we were actually stopped by someone who walked through, they were with us the weekend that we did this message at Reflection Moments, and said that it still resonates with them. Like they still are processing through a revelation of like what the gospel says regarding our pain.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
here we
are. As we're diving into this topic of pain, where we as in our discussion have different areas of pain, different spots in our life where we find that pain persists or comes up. And, obviously I hope it's pretty apparent we're not talking about like physical pain, like a paper cut or a broken leg. We are talking about emotional, spiritual, mental pain.
Yeah.
Spots that are, not visible.
Yeah, you're right. I think we say this a lot, but like everybody's going through something, right? Like there's not a person you encounter, no matter how polished they may look or how well put together they may seem at any given moment. The reality is that everybody's walking through something, which means to a degree, everyone's dealing with some level of pain, right? Something that's bothering them, something that may have hurt them, something they're encountering, something they're processing through. And dude, let's just, kind of put it where it's at. I mean, pain can come in and manifest through multiple different ways and facets. It could be relational pain. It could be career level pain that you're dealing with in your workplace. It could be pain from family of origin issues that may creep up that you're processing through. I mean, there's any number of things that obviously can be trigger points for pain, but the bottom line is as a human, no matter what place or season, if you want to call it that, you find yourself in, we're all processing through something. There's goods, there's difference, there's, the difficult moments. And at the end of the day, you've got to figure out ultimately, how do you walk life processing, dealing, handling pain in a way that ultimately God's given us the grace and authority to overcome.
Yeah. And actually, I think you just kind of handed me something that I want to talk to you guys
about. Tee it up, bro. Tee it up.
Bre, I want you to, in your own experience, working with the pain that nobody sees, going and living about your life with something burdening you, whether it's in your mind or your heart. Have you experienced that? If so, what was that like?
Yeah. I definitely have. And I I learned at a young age, being in church and being in ministry, that pain that, happens either publicly or privately or past or present, whatever the pain is and whenever it was caused, you can't deal with it or show it publicly. And I was taught to always put on like a really good face. And, when people ask you how you're doing, your answer should always be like, blessed and highly favored, and I'm doing great. And, greater is he that's in me than, know. And I learned early, and I don't even think it's like my parents that necessarily taught me that. So when I say learned, I learned this from pastors, from people in the church, right? The deacons, the elders, the ushers, all of it, that especially, I'll say this, especially if you're going to carry any sort of a platform presence, that you have to be able to separate your private life from your public life. They are two separate things. So I remember being in really deep pain privately, and maybe even seconds before I walked out onto a platform.
Wow.
And it was like a flip of a switch, like turn it on, countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody?
Yeah.
And inside I was like dying, but I just learned like that is not, pain is not something that you deal with anyone. I didn't even really learn about counseling or, talking about pain with anybody. So, that it was definitely present. I never knew how to deal with it, especially being in ministry. Yeah. But that's kind of what comes to mind.
I think in that scenario, there's a twofold piece to it that I think people would see. Whether or not you were going through something, I think they would look at you and say, "You're so strong."
Right.
Because you're like, well, nothing's going on. Like, and you're able to effortlessly get up on a platform and then go deal with a leader and then your family's so put together and right? Like, it's like you have so much strength.
Oh, I got told that like my family prior was goals. Oh. They were like, this is goals.
Wow.
And I remember inside being like, oh my gosh, like I have put on the biggest front because you are hashtagging me goals. And when I don't even want to go home. Why would you want to go home if it's goals, right? It's because it's fake. It's a front. And it's because I don't know how to process pain and what's really going on. I don't know how to be transparent.
Yeah.
I didn't. I do now. I didn't know how to be transparent.
There we go. Yeah, and like I said, it's twofold. So you have the people who see nothing going on and say, wow, you're so strong. And then you have the people who may even be on the inside and know, and they say, hey, thank you for being strong because this thing needs to hold up.
Right.
Yep.
And you, through your pain, are carrying... I mean, that's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
It's a large amount. I mean, JP, I think you could speak to even that level of it, of like carrying the pain, even when people know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really, really challenging. And I want to normalize the conversation a bit because we obviously, having prior ministry backgrounds, all of us can speak from that POV very intimately. But it's present for everybody, right? I mean, so if you're working in a corporate position, which is, what I came into ministry from and what I currently do now, we do it all the time, right? We'll wake up on a Monday, not be feeling it in our feelings about something that may have happened on the weekend or, that morning. And then you're clocking in, you're going to your office or, the space that you have for your cubicle space or whatever it is that you have, and you're putting on a front all day, right? And so there's a sense of normalcy in that, yes, our lives have to pick up and keep moving forward, right? We don't want to sit in pain. But on the other side of that, if we're never taking time to pause and process our pain, that's where it can become really dangerous. And I think to Bre's point, that was the danger of what I felt oftentimes in ministry was like, yo, there's not a time to pause because there's always something else to do, right? The engine's churning. We have products to get out. We have stuff to do. People need us. There's hospital visits to make or things you got. And again, nothing wrong with any of those things. But on the other side of those requirements are families and people, right, who may have titles of pastors or, really involved lay leaders, whatever you want to call it. If they don't have a time or a moment or even feel the affirmation to say, yes, pause, We do have Sunday. We have to get through that. But what you're dealing with is super important. So make sure that you take time to pause, whether that's speaking with somebody you're close to or taking time in therapy to go process that. And that's not weird. So intro to therapy, it's amazing. It's life-giving. There's freedom in it, right? It will not change you, but it will give you the resources that you need to be able to process some of those things that can be really tough to figure out all on your own. So pain is a really interesting one. And yeah, when you're in a public space or even in a private space, if you're not really taking time to pause, pain can get really weird. And we talked about that. I think with pain, it's interesting because pain can do really one of two things that I've noticed. I won't say these are the only two, but these are two that I've certainly felt very deeply about. Pain can either pause your progress. So hear me when I say that. Pain is really good at pausing progress. You're moving forward in a certain direction. You hit a roadblock of pain, and dude, pain can cause people to shut down entirely. Progress halted. And that's something the enemy wants to do with sons and daughters all the time, right? You're heading down a pathway of walking out what God's called you to do or what you're thriving in, and then boom, you hit a roadblock of pain, and immediately that progress can get halted, right? And in our mind, our thoughts and ideas, suggestions about magnifying the pain to a point where you feel like you really can't move forward, right? So pain has a way of being able to do that with progress. But on the other side, here's the good news, is that pain can also propel your purpose. And I love that part of it because that's the gospel at work, right? God never wastes a moment of pain. So as much pain as we are dealing with day to day, everybody's walking through something, no matter who you're encountering, they're dealing with some level of pain. If processed from the right lens, the lens of the gospel, the lens of hyper grace, the lens of you being an overcomer, man, God can take that pain and really use it to propel purpose.
So good.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we actually have a scripture here right in line with what you're saying. It's John. Bre, you want to read that?
Yeah, John 16:33. In this world you will have tribulations, but be a good cheer. I have overcome the world.
I'm going to come back to you on that because I think you have something to say. But JP, go ahead and bring us around like overcomer.
For sure.
In this life, you will have tribulations. Like you are an overcomer.
I love the gospel. I love how God puts this stuff because he doesn't sugarcoat reality.
There you go.
So like, shout out to all sons and daughters who are walking grace every day because at the end of the day, Jesus spoke to what we're walking through. And straight up told us like, yo, you're going to do this thing called the gospel. You're going to walk this thing called grace, the unforced rhythms that we've talked about. But here's the reality. There is a caveat to it, right? In this world, you're going to go through stuff. You're going to go through pain. You're going to go through some level of difficulty, unmet expectations, you name it. You know, you're probably going to experience it at some point, right? So that is the reality that Jesus was so good about being very honest and open and upfront about. However, the beauty of what he came to do, not for us, but as us, gave us hope in a new reality, which is, yes, you will go through those things, but here's where he supersedes that. I have already overcome those hard things that you're going to walk through. So in this world, you're going to go through difficult things, right? But take heart, for I've already overcome the world. And that word overcomer, the root word, means to literally come over something. And in this case, coming over your pain. And that was something that we've talked about that God's been really putting on our hearts these last few months, was like just encouraging people. If you're walking through pain, and please hear me if you're listening, watching, whatever you're walking through, just hear the graciousness of the Father to say, please, please, please stop sitting in your pain, because pain was never meant for you to sit in. And I feel like you, even Gavin, can speak to this because I've watched you overcome pain through your story, right? You chose in moments of like really hard times, unexpected things occurring, to not just camp out around your pain and go, woe is me. Look how horrible this is. No one understands. And that's the ploy of the enemy, is to make you feel like, yo, what I'm walking through is like a singular experience. No one else gets it. But man, like how empowering for a son and a daughter when you realize like Jesus's words in John to say, man, yeah, I'm going to go through stuff, but this is where I can set my eyes on the one who's overcome it as me. And because I'm in union with the overcomer himself, guess what that makes me by default?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even, finding myself in lockstep with Mr. Peace himself.
Man.
Right.
And that was difficult. Still is at times.
It's tough.
But with that new covenant definition of overcomer, Bre,
Yeah.
how do you see that playing out in your life? How do you see that playing out in the lives of those around you? Overcoming, coming over pain, active faith in Jesus. What do you see?
I mean, I just keep thinking, like, who doesn't love like a good like underdog story, right? Which is like counted them out because of all of the trials
Like the
they've walked
Warriors.
through. Yeah. No. Whoa.
I would say more so like my Lakers right now.
Like the Lakers.
Not so sure I'm going to side with her
Like,
Warriors.
The Warriors are
Dominated
like
the last 10
that's
years
right.
of
We're
the
pretty
NBA.
dominant.
Yeah, I mean, what are we saying here?
But I appreciate
My
the
Lakers
NBA.
are struggling, trying to get back to dominance.
But I was thinking basketball. Like, who doesn't love that, right? Like,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Back up against the wall. Everybody's counted you out. Right now, we're in the NBA finals, and I'm like loving the fact that the Miami Heat are in the finals.
Yes.
They clawed their way into the playoffs, and now
So
they're
the
sitting
Nuggets.
in the finals. But like I think about reflection even, and the people that go to reflection. We have said it's an open arms community that embraces the unembraced.
Yes.
And when you think about being unembraced, I think at some point all of us have felt that. And it is the underdog story, right? It's like we have walked through things that people might have stiff armed us over, or just the trials, right? And I love the word like be of good cheer, because we've walked through a lot, and yet the three of us, and Andrea's in the room, so the four of us are sitting here with smiles on our face. And it doesn't mean that we didn't even today have rough days. Like today we were sitting at dinner before this, and we've had rough days, right? But be of good cheer, because at the end of the day we win.
Right. And no matter what type of pain you're walking through, God still has such a beautiful way to turn it into something that can propel you forward in purpose.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah. And, even more so when you shift your focus in the midst of pain, ongoing or even nagging at you, coming back from the past, whatever it may be, shifting your focus to elevate your eyes to where your hope comes from, Christ. You are able to build on top of the things that have come before you in life. And I actually think you have a really great illustration for this exact thing. You brought it up at Reflection, and we got it right here to talk about. Let's talk about these, those of you listening, bricks, those of you looking, bricks. JP, talk about these bricks.
So it's cool that you brought this up, because this is something God had put on our hearts concerning pain. And it's an interesting illustration that I think does speak to it quite a bit. But the idea behind the brick was that, bricks are hard, right? And they are jagged edges. They're rough. They can cut, very quickly if you have them rub up against your skin at the wrong angle, right? Much like our pain, right? So pain can be very edgy, thorny, rough, right? It's not a smooth journey. And we think about life, and I look at, one brick as kind of one experience of pain. And how many of these bricks do we stack up across a lifetime? Just take a year of your life and you go, man, I've walked some pain this year. I've walked some really tough things, some difficult things I didn't expect. And, very quickly before you look up, I mean, it's end of December and we're embarking upon New Year's, and you look back on the year and you're like, yo, I've got quite a few bricks stacked up with like painful things I've walked this year.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about pain, and one of the things that God has showed us with this illustration is that very quickly you can see with the stacking of your bricks of pain, that to overcome that pain requires some altitude, right? You've got to ascend to the top of your pain, and then at some point there's a descent, right? You're on the downward hill slope of your pain. You've come over it, right? And then you what was once a headwind became, a tailwind at some point, right? It's propelling you forward. And what's cool about the gospel, and even the idea of what Jesus said in John 16 about the idea of like, hey, you're going to walk through pain. You're going to walk through moments where your bricks may be feeling like they're stacking up pretty heavily. But take heart, be of good cheer, because those are the very things that he's already overcome. And so when we speak of altitude, I go back to something, Gavin, you said to me. We were, I think, at dinner or something a couple years ago, and you said, hey, you know, one thing I've noticed, and, you know, I'm paraphrasing for you, but you said one thing I've noticed with life as you've walked pain is that your attitude determines your altitude. And that struck me. I was like, bro, that needs to be said, written, put on shirts, like, because it's so true.
Yeah.
The attitude, the point of view that we take into moments of pain determines our altitude, our ability to scale to the top of these bricks of pain, get to the top of it, and then at some point get on the downward slope, right? And overcome it, right? Come over whatever it is that you're facing.
And I'll give context to that quote.
Yes.
So I was on a hike, and I was in a beautiful area, like one of the top beautiful areas in the entire world, but I was so miserable on this hike. I you know, at the times I was so mad, I didn't want to keep climbing, and I didn't want to look around me at all the beauty that I was miles high above, however high I was going, right? And my friends had encouraged me to, you know, stand up and go, and let's keep walking, have a protein bar, you know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was able to change my mind, change my attitude about how like the situation I found myself in. You can't just give up on the side of a mountain.
Right.
Can't afford a helicopter bill. Hello, you know,
Yeah,
but you know, really changing my mindset, changing my attitude, making the ascent, enjoying the time with my friends, able to then really scale and get to the place that I needed to be on this very literal hike.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking about this, talking about ascending things in our life, you know, one thing we have written down here is like, you know, depending on your vantage point, sometimes these things can even block your view.
Right.
Dude.
Of where you're going.
Right.
That is absolutely it. And, you know, you think of, and for those listening, even for those watching, I mean, again, think of the kind of reality in your mind of like, I've got bricks stacking up that are full of moments of pain. And that pain could have honestly started when you were a kid. It could be things you experienced in your teen years, or even as an adult, you know, whatever that is. Sometimes we don't always get closure for pain. So there is that feeling of like, man, it continues to just pile up for me.
Or like you don't even remember life without it. Like that pain. Like you have literally learned life with that pain.
Yeah. And when you almost kind of normalize the pain to a degree, right? Like you're used to just carrying around this heaviness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that we didn't talk about so far is that these bricks, one of them has weight.
Yep.
Right. So you keep stacking that. And then at some point you're forced to carry that pain, those bricks around. That's weighty.
Yeah.
Right.
No wonder you're stopped.
Yeah. And it pauses your progress, right? Because you're having to carry a bunch of weight that unfortunately the people who cause the pain aren't coming back around to either one, give you closure, or two, say, how can I help take that weight off, right?
There you go.
They're not looking for you. They've come and they've gone, right? They've hurt you and then they bounced. They said, I'm going to do you dirty, or I'm going to look at you sideways, and then I'm off doing my own thing. And good luck to you. Hope you get closure. Or if you don't get closure, not my problem, right? So you're left to just literally carry bricks of pain around through courses of your life. Sometimes for folks, a full lifetime, right? That they never feel like I've healed or overcome this pain. And to your point, what you said was so powerful. As bricks stack up, right? You start to look at it, and for some people, we magnify our pain to a point where it can feel like, you know, a molehill. It can feel like a mountain of pain, right? And when you start to look at that in a theoretical sense, right, there is an altitude to overcoming, right? I've got to, much like you were on that hike, scale a mountain of pain to get to the top of it, and hopefully by the grace of God, get on the other side, right, as an overcomer. And so what's challenging is when you start to experience pain and it starts to stack, we have the choice of either sitting in that or being an overcomer. And the danger of sitting in our pain, and I've been guilty of this, right? I go through pain and it feels better to my flesh to sit in it. I want to feel like the victim. I want people to feel sorry for me. I want people to validate it. And I will be in my feelings if someone doesn't.
Right.
Right. So someone comes around and I'm like, yo, this was so hard. Look at what someone did. Look at this brick.
Yeah.
And it could be for one person, they put a stack of bricks, right? Look what they put on me. And if someone didn't validate that, I'm feeling some sort of way about it.
Yeah.
Well, are you in my corner? Do you care about me? Do you love me? Do you really understand what I'm walking through? And then the choice I end up making in certain moments is to sit in that, right? And as soon as I sit behind this pile of bricks, guess what that blocks? My view of blessing.
That's right. The future.
So all I can see in front of me are the bricks, my pain. And that is where the enemy wants us to sit. We lose sight of all the great things around us because, again, God hasn't stopped working. The favor of God hasn't certainly dried up. The grace of God is still abounding. Man, the blessings of God are still on full tap and flowing freely in and through my life. But when I take a moment and I go, man, this pain feels really good to sit in, what I start to magnify and put immediately in front of my eyes is my pain. And I lose sight of purpose, right? I lose sight of the ability to make progress. I lose sight of all of the amazing things that may be sitting around me for the sake of exchanging that for a horrible view, right? A view that's toxic, unhealthy, and that sometimes it can be really destructive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have sit on
Yes.
your pain. Then the next place you could find yourself is standing in or next to, by, with your pain.
Yep.
We have a scripture in Ephesians says, verse 6.
Yep.
Chapter 6, verse 13 says, "It is most important, therefore, to acquaint yourself with every aspect of God's armor." And for anybody listening, tuning in, grab onto this. You are fully fit. You just end it there. You're fully fit.
Fully fit.
It's done.
Not a work in progress.
You
You're
are
fully fit.
to powerfully defeat any onslaught or contradiction on any day of confrontation, triumphantly standing your ground.
Standing your ground. And I feel like, is that not a word for all of us? Right? In moments where we have chosen to sit in our pain, or maybe for those of you listening or watching who are currently sitting in your pain, the word is to stand. Stand. And even as you stand, realize it's not your strength you're standing in, it's his.
That's right.
So he has made you an overcomer, which means he's giving you the strength to stand.
Yeah.
So the choice is not to sit in your pain, but to stand and prepare to start coming over your pain, because that's what overcomers do.
Yeah. Standing isn't, sexy. It's not this big movement. It's not something you could post about on Instagram or whatever. It's resilience. What does Bre standing look like to you as an overcomer concerning your pain? Standing, what does that look like?
I think standing for me looks like, still showing up in the sense of, maybe traumatic experiences with people or ministry, right? Like I think the easier thing would be to give up and to go, like, I already know how this is going to go. I know how these people are going to be. It's all the same. And I think standing is saying, like, in whatever that area is for you, listening or watching, like whatever your area of maybe trauma or pain, standing is looking right back in the face of the thing that hurt you deeply or caused you grief and saying, you don't own me. I am victorious. I am an overcomer. And I'm going to step into rooms that I could talk myself out of. Somebody else could surely say I don't deserve to be in. But because of Christ inside me, I'm going to stand and I'm going to walk with my head held high into those rooms and into those spaces that were once traumatic. It's taking ground. Right? It's taking back the things that
Reclaiming.
That's it. That like not only like we're building up, that stopped you in a way, held you down. Like that's weighty. And we walk life with weight. And when you release that and you go, I'm not going to let that determine like my altitude. I'm not going to let that determine where I go. I believe that is fully standing, and it's not just like a stand slouched. I just believe it's like head held high. This is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and it's so good. Standing is also a faith step, right? Like, because when you're sitting in your pain and you choose to stand, it's with the intent that I'm getting ready to come over something.
Yeah.
Yep.
So get ready, world, because I'm coming.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Whoever came at you thought they gave you their best punch. And yeah, you may have turned your head slightly. Maybe you went to a knee, but you got back up and literally are looking at them in the face going, is that the best you got?
There you go.
Right.
And I see that as the Father literally preparing a table at the feet of your enemies.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
He is so confident that you will be an overcomer that he's willing to roll out the white linens and prepare a feast right in the front of your enemies going, yo, there's nothing that's going to touch my son or my daughter.
Yep.
So when you choose not to sit and you choose to stand with the intention of coming over your pain, it is a full faith journey, right? And it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about it. I mean, when you are coming over something, your pain in this case that you're walking through, and it's interesting because this brick that I hold for those who are watching and even those of you listening, I have a brick in my hand. And this was written by one of our kids that weekend that we had reflection.
Oh, wow.
And we had everybody in community kind of go through an exercise, which was we provided a bunch of bricks for each person. And the exercise was to write on one side of the brick what your pain area or pain point was, right? And it's interesting. I mean, we didn't talk to our kids about it. They had no idea we were doing it that Sunday. But our son wrote on his brick that his pain point was church. That, and, you know, subsequently after reflection, we got a chance to talk with him. And he said, he was like, you know, I watched what you guys walk through and saw it day in and day out. And it hurt me to watch my parents go through something that wasn't fair.
Wow.
And he carries his own level of pain, even at his age, from that experience, right?
Yeah.
But the power in this is that when, you know, you're able to not only identify your pain, but ultimately see your pain through the Father's eyes.
Yes.
And how he sees victory amidst your pain, how he sees an overcomer amidst your pain. It changes everything. And so the process of stepping over and overcoming your pain, and we said there's some practical things, right? Like, how do you really step over your pain? How do you overcome it in a way that speaks to what Jesus ultimately secured as a victory as you? And there were 3 areas that we talked through. Sometimes it means you got to reverse some things. If you're practically wanting to come over your pain, that's a word for somebody. Whatever you may have been doing before that was causing pain, stepping over it may mean you got to reverse some behaviors or some things that you were in, to go, okay, yeah, I'm willing for the sake of health, for the sake of healing, to reverse what I've been doing that may have been causing harm. It may mean that you've got to release some things.
Yeah.
So that's another word for somebody, right? If you're dealing with pain for maybe a person or a relationship, or an environment that you found yourself in, or, you know, willingly chose to be in, it may mean at some point in your life, to find that health and healing, you've got to release that area to walk in healing, to be the overcomer God's called you and ultimately sacrifice his life to ensure you to be.
That's right.
And then the last thing is that you may have to run to some things, right? There may be a situation, I can think about family dynamics or broken relationships, those things that, you know, sometimes can string out for years, right? Strange scenarios where you're like, yo, we used to be cool and like, we're not cool no more. And it may mean at some point the Holy Spirit puts on your heart to call somebody, reach out to somebody, text somebody you haven't talked to in a long time. And that in some way, shape, or form is almost like you running to it and going, hey, I've been running from this thing that I know has been causing me pain even while I've been running. And sometimes love requires you to turn around and run to it, not from it.
Yes.
And I'll say too, like all 3 of those things, like if you are valid in your pain, right? Like your pain's validated and there's a reason why you're in pain. all three of those things are really hard to do.
I was literally about to say, we're not saying any of this is easy.
No.
I took the words out of
Oh
my
my
mouth.
It's a
gosh,
journey, straight up.
Okay,
That's a great
reversing,
point.
so changing your behavior, because you could look at the other person and go, they're out of bounds, they're foul, but I have to change my behavior. Or you can look at releasing some things, and releasing things is really hard to do when you are validated on why you're holding on to it. And you can even in your mind go like, no, I'm woke, or like, I'm like, you're not going to get me again, fool me once,
Yeah.
and so you could hold on to that. And then running to some things, addressing it. I know a lot of times if somebody's done me wrong or a situation, I'm like, well, I'm not coming to you. I deserve for you to reach out. I deserve for you to apologize to me. So it's being like this bigger person. All three of those things are so not easy, like you said.
Yeah.
But it really does show like the Christ in you.
Right.
Wow.
Because like from like a human side,
Yeah.
it's like, what? You want me to do what?
Well, I was going to say, on top of all that, like we've read in the scripture, you're well fit for it.
Yeah.
Man,
So
that's it, dude.
It's not
Well
easy,
fit.
but guess what? You are.
It's who you
well
are.
Fit. And speaking to the running aspect, and as we're wrapping this discussion up, I had this revelation a few years ago. This new covenant, like unveiling picture of the Israelites when they were fleeing from Egypt to the Promised Land. Scripture says, they were running, they were fleeing. But let's talk about the fact that in a new covenant understanding, they were not running from Egypt, but running to
Yeah.
the Promised Land.
That's it.
So some people may
Yeah.
say, when you're running, oh my God, they're running from their pain.
Right.
Of course they leave the church. Of
Right.
course they leave the job. Of
Right.
course they left their
Man, that's
spouse.
so good.
Of course they ran.
Right.
I'm not running from.
Right.
I'm running to.
Right.
Yeah.
My promises, my peace, my
Yes.
safety,
Man.
an embrace of grace, whatever that's going to be, wherever that's going to be.
Yeah.
And ultimately, from the outside looking in, that may be how it looks. But guess what? From the inside looking out,
Man.
woo,
Looks all
Yeah.
the way right.
oh my God.
Perfectly fit.
Holy moly.
That's so good. That's so
That's
good.
so
And then
dope.
also like
That's so dope.
between that, I mean, there are all so many good things. I'll also say like when you talked about the releasing, you said something one time we were dealing with a relationship that was like really difficult. You said, I'm not going to give up on this person, but I'm going to give this person up to God.
Mm.
And that release of, it's not that you're giving up on the possibility of that relationship ever being healed or that person itself. You're just saying, it's not mine anymore. God, I'm going to give this to you,
Yeah.
Yes.
and releasing it in a healthy way.
Yep. And there's a rest in that, right?
Mhm.
Like you're not trying to manufacture your own answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's important to speak practically to like health for people.
Yes.
Some relationships are just not healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to seek healthy proximity with those relationships.
Right.
Some may have to be in, we use the analogy of, sometimes you've got to love people from across the street.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't love them.
Yeah.
Right.
But when I love you and I wave to you, it's going to be from you on one side of the street
That's right.
and me on the other. Because for whatever reason, where we find ourselves at this stage of our lives,
Wow.
it is not healthy for us to either be on the same side of the street, to be in the same house, to be on the porch together.
Right.
Right. And that's okay.
Mhm.
You can still love people from a distance.
Yeah.
Yes.
If that is ultimately what's best for your health, for your safety.
Yes.
So there's a practical reality to that, which is in those moments where you may have to seek a little bit of distance from people, but still love them where they are, still pray for them, still speak life over them. It is the reality of saying, I'm not giving up on you. So just because I go across the street, please understand, doesn't mean I'm giving up on us and what potentially could be if we were both in healthy spaces and
Right.
respectful of each other and set good boundaries with one another. It just means that I'm choosing to give you up to the Father, which means, God, I trust you to do more with restoring this relationship than I could ever
do.
manufacture on my own.
That's right.
And that is a place of empowerment because it's you trusting the Father, not trusting yourself. That changes the game. So when you walk this journey of overcoming things, and again, all the things we're speaking to is a form of you overcoming. handing him back the brick
Well,
here.
I'll say this too, like,
Go ahead.
because I know we're wrapping up, but you know, all of those things, those three different things, once you have overcome, like the point is, don't go back to sitting in that place of pain because it is familiar, because you have been in it so long. And Deuteronomy 2:3 says, "You have circled this mountain long enough. Now turn north." And the reason why I held this brick is, I don't know if you have to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. You can find them in the outdoor section. Get a brick.
Yeah.
Maybe you have one in your garage. Maybe whatever you want to do. This was powerful for our family. I know for families that were at Reflection. But the point is, you know, we all wrote what our pain was on one side. But Deuteronomy 2:3, "You have circled this mountain long enough. Now turn north," right? So on the other side of the brick,
There you go.
we wrote what we're believing and stepping over our
Yeah.
pain.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that word was, we wrote it. And then we stacked them all up and literally just stepped over the bricks.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so powerful. Like you can
It's a
get
great
so
picture.
stuck
Yeah.
in your pain, so comfortable, so it's normalized.
Mhm.
And we're here to remind you, not that it's easy, but that you are an overcomer
That's right.
and you can overcome your pain. You can step over what once held you, gripped you. You can release it. We're here to encourage you in that
Yeah.
and say, hey, we've all gone through things that people would say, man, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And we're here.
Yep.
Here.
So,
Yeah, that picture of going north is a picture of forward progress.
yep.
Yes.
Right? It is a beautiful picture of us overcoming. And, you know, I end with 1 John 4:4. And it's really a word from the Father to each of us, myself included, saying you. So again, I'm saying you for whomever's listening. You, the Father saying, dear children, are from God and have overcome them.
Mm.
I don't know where your them
Yeah.
is.
Yep.
I don't know who they are for you. But hear the words of the Father because they're so sweet and gentle to us. And he's saying you, son, daughter, dear children, are from God
There you go.
and have overcome, literally come over whatever pain you have walked through or maybe walking through at present. And why? That's the logical question that anyone would ask. Well, how is that so? That sounds good, God, but like, what makes that a reality and a truth that I can walk in? And he's so good because he doesn't leave us without the answer. And he says, because the one who is in you, the one you are in union with,
Yes.
Jesus himself, greater is he that is in you than anything or anyone in this present world. So literally, you've got the greatest overcomer residing, taking home residence in you,
Yeah.
in us,
That's so good.
which means
Wow.
by the goodness and the grace of God, we are literally perfectly fit to step over whatever pain we've walked through, public, private, past, or present. And so we speak that over you guys.
Right.
We just speak life. We speak strength. We speak victory over you as overcomers. And when you have a moment to do what Bre said and grab your bricks, we just hope that that picture of you stepping over your bricks is a picture of you literally doing what Jesus said, which is you're an overcomer. You were perfectly built and fit for that. And stepping over the bricks is nothing more than a picture of what he has promised to do in and through your life amidst the pain you're walking through.
I think that about wraps it up for today. For more content and to follow along with all things Reflection, find us on Instagram at Reflection Global and subscribe to Reflection Moments podcast on any platform you're listening to. Lastly, please remember that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're loved, favored, and have an incredible purpose for your life.
Yes.
Come on.
See you guys next time.
We love you.
Love you.